In this lecture, you will learn about the election of 1796, the XYZ affair, and the Alien and Sedition Acts. The leading contenders for Washington's position were John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. In theory, they both agree with Washington's farewell address warning about the need for unity of governments. However, around them raged a party contest split along pro-English versus pro-French lines. And the leading Federalists and Republicans informally caucused to choose candidates. The Federalists picked Adams, and they picked Thomas Pinckney to run with him. The Republicans Jefferson, and they settled on Aaron Burr to run with him. On election day, however, things will not go as planned. You see, during this time, the Constitution stated that each electoral college voter could cast 2 votes for any 2 candidates, but only on 1 ballot. And the top vote-getter became president, and the next highest assumed the vice presidency. Adams will ultimately win the election, but the election was so contested that although Adams won, Thomas Jefferson received more electoral votes than Pinckney and came in second. He was elected vice president. The election of 1796 was the only one to elect a president and vice president from opposing tickets. Adams' inaugural speech pledged neutrality in foreign affairs and respect for the French people, which made Republicans feel hopeful. However, under his administration, things will get very complicated. France retaliated for the British Friendly Jade Treaty by abandoning the terms of its 1778 wartime alliance with the United States and allowing French privateers to detain American ships carrying British goods. Although Federalists started talking openly about war with France, Adams preferred negotiations and dispatched a 3-man commission to France in the fall of 1797. The commission eventually met with 3 unnamed French agents, later known to the American public as X, Y, and C. Upon the meeting, the French suggested that a bribe of $250,000 plus a $12 million loan to the French government will be the price of a peace treaty. The Americans will refuse to pay the bribe. Americans reacted to the XYZ affair with shock and anger, and in 1798, the United States entered into its first undeclared war with France called the Quasi-War. During the winter of 1798, 14 American warships packed by 200 armed merchant ships captured 80 French vessels and forced French warships out of American waters, but the president refused to ask Congress for an official declaration of war. This is why this conflict is known as the Quasi-War. There was no home front unification in this time of undeclared war, and antagonism only intensified between Federalists and Republicans. Pro-French mobs roamed the capital city streets. Adams, fearing for his personal safety, stocked weapons in his presidential quarters. Federalist leaders soon moved to silence the opposition, and in mid-1798, Congress passed the Sedition Act, which made conspiracies or revolts illegal and penalized those who spoke or wrote anything that defamed the president or Congress. The act also targeted aliens living in the United States. A Sedition Act also extended the waiting period for citizenship and empowered the president to deport or imprison without trial any foreigner deemed a danger. As a result, hundreds of French nationals and immigrants living in the United States will be deported without due process. Republicans strongly opposed the Alien and Sedition Acts on the grounds that they were in conflict with the Bill of Rights. A heated debate ensued. On one side, you had those who argued that free speech simply meant a lack of prior censorship and restraint, but did not guarantee against punishment. According to this logic, unruly speech made society less free, not more. James Wilson, one of the principal architects of the Constitution, argued that every author is responsible when he attacks the security or welfare of the government. However, this argument shocked opponents of the Alien and Sedition Act that articulated a new and expansive vision for liberty. The New York lawyer Tunis Wortman, for example, demanded an absolute independence of the press. Likewise, the Virginia judge George Hay called for any publication, whatever criminal, to be exempt from legal punishment. Many Americans then began to argue that free speech meant the ability to say virtually anything without fear of prosecution. In the end, those who opposed the act did not have the votes to revoke the act in Congress, though nor could Republicans count on the federal judiciary to challenge them, since the court was dominated by Federalist judges. Jefferson and Madison turned to the state legislators to press their opposition. Each man anonymously drafted a set of resolutions condemning the acts and had the legislators of Virginia and Kentucky present them to the federal government in the late fall of 1798. The resolutions made little dent in the Alien and Sedition Acts, but the idea of states' rights to nullify federal law did not disappear. Amid all the war hysteria and sedition fears in 1798, President Adams regained his balance, but the Federalists were not pleased, and he lost his party's support. That is all for now, but watch the next video lecture to learn what happens next.